I've got it's going.
There you go. Now you
I
can get the link
missed.
from the top there where it says live on YouTube.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay.
We're live. I can see it on YouTube.
This repeating thing is
Don't forget to make me the co-host when you get a minute.
say again louder.
Don't forget to make me the co-host when you get a minute.
Okay.
Good evening, Urban Renewal Board. We're waiting for our vice chair to arrive on the meeting, and at that point, she can get started. So thanks for your patience. I just talked to her, so I know she's going to be here. Vice Chair Long, I see you on the meeting. We're ready to have you get started whenever you're ready.
I don't think she was quite connected yet. I don't think she heard you, Alice.
Vice Chair Long, ready to have you get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my computer decided it was a good time to reboot when I was trying to log on. I'm not really sure, so I'll use my phone. It's kind of weird. So I'd like to call this meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board meeting to order. It's January 18th. Paula, would you please call the roll?
Diana Bailey is absent. Stacy Coburn.
Present.
Tracy Dujic.
Present.
John Frederick.
Here.
Tim McLaughlin. Absent. Darcy Long.
Present.
Maria Pena is absent. Dan Richardson.
Present.
And Kathy Schwartz.
Present.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to mention, in case anyone didn't see the email that went out earlier today, we have a new Zoom procedure. So if you mute yourself during the meeting, you'll have to raise your hand in order for Paula to unmute you. It's a new procedure, so it's probably best not to mute yourself during the meeting if possible. At this time, we need to do the election of officers. And before we do that, I think we should take this time to recognize our outgoing chair, Gary Grossman. Gary has really provided strong leadership for the urban renewal during his tenure here. And I know this is his second time on the board, and we're all very appreciative for the way that he has guided us through his experience and through his knowledge and procedures of running meetings, as well as just his general knowledge of the downtown. So I'd like to take this time to say thank you to Gary. And then I'd also like to turn it over to Director Cannon so she can make a presentation.
Former Chair Grossman, I don't know where I would be without you. I'm telling you, you should have been on the payroll for a few months when I first started, because you provided so much guidance to me, so much institutional knowledge, and who knew that I would encounter you again after knowing you as a teenager at church in Albany, Oregon. So who knew? Anyway, it's a small world. That's evidence of that. So I really, and also who knew that I'd get to work with your wife? How wonderful is that also? So thank you for all of your great service to me individually, but also to our city. I really appreciate your thoughtful approach to things. You're just are so spot on with your advice, and you also know how to take this group through change. That's been evidenced through your service over these 2 tenures that you've had here with the city. So I hope that you will not ride off into the sunset. I hope you won't make yourself a stranger. I hope you'll be a thoughtful critic of our good work and let us know how we're doing. And also just enjoy the time that you have, the extra time on Monday evenings or Tuesday evenings, but also the extra time that you're going to get maybe in retirement. I don't know when you will retire, but I'm looking forward to hearing about all your great adventures. So does anyone else want to chime in? I would welcome that. Mayor Mays?
Thank you, Gary. I also would like to thank you for your service. If you remember when I appointed you, I guess it was 3 years ago, I was looking for somebody that had a lot of experience and somebody that had a grasp of community issues. And I met with a lot of people in my during my term as mayor and before I was mayor. And I don't think I met one person who had a better grasp of the depth of the city issues and the breadth of community issues as you did. Not only, for those of you that don't know, Gary not only has served on the Urban Renewal Board twice, he was also chair of the Budget Committee for many years. So Gary, thank you very much for all you've done. And in closing, I'd like you to just send me privately an email listing those boards and commissions that you're still willing to serve on so that I can make the appointment. Probably by next month would be great. Okay, thank you.
Oh, goodness.
Well, it would be, it's going to be good to only have one meeting on this Tuesday every month because I actually moved from this meeting to another meeting. So I'm down one. We'll see how it goes, Rich. Thank you very much for the kind words. I got back on the Urban Renewal Agency Board to help get us organized to liquidate the property that had stacked up on us and facilitate getting through all of those things. And I think we've been greatly successful. There's yet to be whatever there is to be on the Tony's property, but things are moving forward here. I am really pleased with how the board has done. We're missing a few people from when I started, like Scott Baker, who was very instrumental in getting some things done early on. So I believe I'm leaving Urban Renewal in very good hands. I wouldn't have any criticism, but if I can ever be of any help to any of you, I would be glad to do that. So with that, I will turn it back over to Vice Chair Long.
Thank you, Gary.
I just have one more thing to add, and that is, Gary, I just sent it home with Izetta this evening. I sent a very important token of our appreciation. We gave him a gift card so he can enjoy some time at one of our local restaurants and his favorite, Casa El Mirador. Did I get that right? Yeah, so nice to see him there. So hope you enjoy that and maybe take your whole family and enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Great. All right. So I just realized that the Pledge of Allegiance is actually listed on the agenda after the election of officers, but I would prefer to go ahead and do that now if there's no objections. So please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that's always awkward with the lag on Zoom. All right, so at this time, because Chair Grossman has retired from the board, we need to do an election of officers. This is our normal procedure every couple of years. So at this time, I'd like to open up the nominations for the chair.
My hand is up. Is that proper procedure?
Yes, sorry, my phone only lets me see one at a time, so you have to say something.
Oh, good to know. Okay. Well, it is my pleasure to nominate our vice chair for chair, Darcy Long. So I'll start with that.
Thank you. I accept. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of Darcy Long for chair, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Now I would like, I'm sorry.
Nothing.
So now I'd like to open up the nominations for vice chair. I would like to nominate Kathy Schwartz. Are there any other nominations? All in favor of Kathy Schwartz as vice chair, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Kathy, welcome as the new vice chair.
As I like that title. You know, it's impressive, but you don't have to do much. So
Yeah. I'll try not to miss too many meetings. Okay, at this time, we need to approve the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda or any changes?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the change of the Pledge of Allegiance being prior to the election of officers.
Thank you, Tracy. Do I have a second?
This is Stacy. I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda with the moving of the Pledge of Allegiance. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, we have the approval of the October 19th, 2021 minutes. Did anyone have any changes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Member Richardson. Do I have a second?
I'll second. It's Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. All in favor of approving the October 19th minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Excuse me, Chair
yeah.
Curtis or Long.
Yeah,
I did
Chair.
not see Board Member Frederick. On, sir?
Oh,
It's helpful if you also raise your hands.
okay. And also it'll be helpful if you're raising your hand for me, if you can just speak up, because on my phone, I can only see whoever's talking. I can't see everybody on the panel. And hopefully I'll get that fixed and get on my computer here shortly. At this time, I would like to open the meeting up to public comment. Is there anyone present who would like to make a comment?
Yes, Chair Long, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm Gene Parker. My address is 2445 East 15th Street in the Dalles. I was a longtime city attorney from 1990 to 2020. And during that time, I also was the attorney for the Urban Renewal Agency. And I saw on your agenda tonight, you're going to be talking about the update of the Tony's building involved, including the environmental cleanup. and a possible demolition. And I want to address the agency about some options following a demolition of the property. I think some of the members are aware that myself and former urban renewal manager Steve Harris put a lot of hours into an agreement with Tocola Properties to redevelop the property for a mixed use. We put in countless hours, and there was a lot of money spent by Tocola and by the urban renewal agency to make that project happen. We actually reached the point of having a disposition and development agreement that was ready to have the property redeveloped. One of the big obstacles we faced was getting a ruling from the Bureau of Labor and Industries that the project would not have to pay prevailing wages. Ultimately, we didn't get that favorable ruling, and that stopped the project. And that was in large part because the site preparation costs that the agency was going to incur were considered part of the overall contribution of the agency. Basically, we could not contribute more than $750,000 to avoid keep the project from being a prevailing wage project. And in my recollection, I think that Tocola had a project in Independence where the site was actually cleared. The demolition occurred and the site preparation occurred before they proceeded to do that. And I think the demolition now of the Tony's building creates the option that we might be able to revisit that project. I think that certainly was one that was consistent with the agency's goals of getting housing downtown and having a mixed use development. So I would like to encourage the members that, assuming that you proceed with the demolition, that perhaps you reach out to Dwight Untie. He was the president of Tocola. He worked closely with us on that project, and I think he wanted it to proceed. But since it had to involve paying prevailing wages, the project couldn't proceed. But he might possibly be interested. Certainly, his company put a lot of time and effort into the project and wanted to have it happen, but it unfortunately didn't. So I would encourage the members to consider that option and maybe reach out to Mr. Untie or perhaps some other developer that once the demolition had occurred and the site was actually ready to go, I think that we might be in a position to get a better ruling from the Bureau of Labor and Industries that the project could proceed without having to pay the prevailing wages. And I think had we had that favorable ruling, that building would have probably been completed. And I could have looked at it as maybe one of my successful projects rather than one that didn't succeed. So again, I would encourage you to look at that option when and if the building is demolished.
Thank you, Jean. So just to clarify, you're saying that in the Monmouth project, they did not consider the demolition because it occurred prior to.
Right. Yeah, that was a big difference in our project. We had not actually demolished the building, and we tried to argue that that didn't make a difference, but that was one of the big stumbling blocks that we ran into with Boley. And it was very disappointing because we spent a lot of time and money to get that project to happen. And then that adverse ruling basically killed it. And it was disappointing.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Remember to speak up because I can't see you with raising your hand. Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to staff comments and project updates. Director Cannon?
Chair Long, I was going to call you Vice Chair. Chair Long, congratulations. Looking forward to working with you. A few project updates. We have some work today. You'll get an update in a few minutes on the rec building, so we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. I will also later in the agenda be giving you an update on the Tony's building project, so you'll be hearing that. You may be wondering what is happening with strategic planning, Alice. You may be asking that. And as I noted in my earlier emails, the city manager assigned me to a very important project this fall, and that was to be the lead on the community vision project for the city council on behalf of the city manager and city council. So I've been working with a consultant team that we've selected, and we've finished a community survey where we were just shy of collecting 450 responses to our online survey, and 5 of those were Spanish speakers, and the other 430 or so were for English speakers, and excited about that response. And we look forward to, after I've had a chance to consult some more with the city manager and the council, looking forward to that project moving forward. We are going to have a new city manager. The recruitment is underway. And so I think it's council's hope to have this project completed or near completion when that new city manager arrives this spring. So that's going on. What that has done is taken some of my time away that I might have devoted to strategic planning. When I had talked to, for the Urban Renewal Agency, when I talked to Chair Grossman about it, he had said, well, you know, Alice, it might make sense to finish the strategic planning for this whole city, because that might guide, or excuse me, the community vision, because that might guide the strategic planning for urban renewal. So what I have from you, I will make you a promise that as I have time, and if I'm able to devote time to the report card step, which was my next step, I will jump on that and get that to you. We'll go through that exercise as soon as I can. In the meantime, however, let's just plan on the fact that we're going to finish up that that community vision, the citywide community vision, and have that help guide our strategic planning efforts. Happy to take any questions or comments on that project that you might have, or feedback you might have for me. Okay, well, with that, I will move on. First Street project is moving right along. Very pleased with our progress there. We continue working on some preliminary work that we need to complete before, design work that we need to complete before we can do the right-of-way acquisition part of this project. So stay tuned. I will likely, I think within the next month or so, I'm going to have an agreement that is a funding agreement that I actually have to take to City Council on behalf of this project. The funding will come from Urban Renewal, but ODOT, I think if I remember this correctly, Jonathan, our city attorney, ODOT can only do IGAs with the city organization. So
That's
I will,
right.
Yeah, I'll be coming forward with that. It's basically an updated cost estimate for the project. If I remember correctly, we already have all those funds set aside in one of our budget funds. And so there are no surprises, at least from my perspective, with this new funding agreement. It was something they had discussed with me last spring. ODOT meeting day, that's what I meant by that. I think that's the only project I have. I will continue. I've said a few different times that we have interest from two housing property owners who are interested in getting under construction either during, at least the biggest housing project would be anywhere from 40 to 80 units. That one, the developer hopes to be under construction in the downtown by the end of calendar year 2022. And the other one I expect will, with about 16 new units and some new ground floor commercial space, that will be under construction, we think, at the beginning of 2023. So changes are coming, and it's really exciting to watch all these new things happening. And of course, Mr. Carpenter is making excellent progress on the rec building. So we're seeing it kind of as we speak. So with that, Chair, I'm finished with my report. Happy to
Okay,
answer
great. And Director Cannon, is there a timeline on those two projects as far as wanting to know if we have any changes to our incentive program so they can figure out their plans, or have they already committed to building those units?
Their projects are directly incumbent on getting some incentives that will be discussed later on this agenda.
Okay.
And some of those projects, we can talk more about it at that time on the agenda. But I have promoted the fact that you told me as a board, and the city council has certainly said it, that there is a desire on both of your parts, both the city council and the Urban Renewal Board, to create a neighborhood, to have the addition of new housing units in the downtown. And in fact, I was telling someone today that I met with a local person who may be willing to open a small grocery store in the downtown. However, they noted that, gosh, in order to support a grocery store, we need more folks who can walk to the store in the neighborhood, so to speak. So those are, I think there is good reason to support getting some more units in our downtown. And I'd love to have some incentives that would support that and also support these 2 projects that we hope will be underway soon.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have one action item tonight, and that is consideration of the 5th addendum to the Recreation Building Disposition and Development Agreement, 213 and through 219 East 2nd Street. Director Cannon, do you have an update on that?
I do, and I am just going to scroll down in my agenda here. Just hold on for a second. I'll be right there. Get to that page. Well, Jonathan, the city attorney, and I, Chair Long, and members of the board kind of snicker to ourselves when we see how many addendums we've had on this project. Addenda, I guess is the right word. We were on the 5th addendum for this disposition and development agreement for this project. We have had, of course, a global pandemic and a few other things that have disrupted the project schedule. However, I'm happy to report that the project is making excellent progress, and we are very pleased with what's happened. What we've done with this 5th addendum as a way to avoid having to come back and bring a 6th addendum, we have offered some very generous time extensions to Mr. Carpenter. He believes he will be finished with the construction of this of the building, the 2 storefronts that are the easternmost storefronts, the ones that you see underway or mostly finished. He thinks he'll be done within the month, within the next 4 weeks. I think we've given him 90 days or more to finish that work, because not only does he have to finish that work and get final inspections from our building department in Iwasco County, we also are under contract to, the way the contract reads, the DDA reads, we have to close on those properties with Mr. Carpenter. So we need some time to pull all that together and get that completed. So what you see in the schedule, I'm going to get to it, is that we would create an extension to April 18th, 2022 for the 2nd and 3rd installment contract payments of $7,500 each, for a total of $15,000. We would also receive as a city the copy of the certificate of occupancy for the structures on parcels 1 and 2, which are the easternmost parcels in the rec building development. And all of that would be completed in addition to the closing on those properties by April 18th, 2022. And on the last storefront, and that is actually an indoor-outdoor space, which is the westernmost storefront that sits between the new storefronts, the 2 new, and it's the part where the roof collapsed, and the last stop. That one has not yet received a building permit from our city, from city staff. There's a little bit more work to do, so we're finishing that up. We'll issue the permit, and then I know Mr. Carpenter's ready to go soon to get that under construction. We've given him another year to complete that work. He tells me he believes he can get it done sooner. I believe him. I believe that he will be able to get that done sooner. So stay tuned for that. But we hope this is the very last addendum we have to do. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Our recommendation is that to the board is that you move to authorize the execution of the 5th addendum to the disposition and development agreement between the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and Mr. Todd Carpenter and Ms. Carla McQuaid for property known as the Recreation Building located at 213 to 219 East 2nd Street. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as a board.
Okay, great. So now I'm on my computer and I can see everyone. So does anyone have any questions, comments? Mr. Carpenter, did you want to add anything to that, or did Director Cannon cover it?
Yeah, if I could. Todd Carpenter, 216 East 5th Street for Paula. Dallas, Oregon 97058.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jonathan and I feel like he's glaring at me because when I first met him, he said, I only want to do this one time. And so I apologize. I feel super bad about this. We got right down to the wire. We were going to finish it. And then we learned our very last task for the 2 east side buildings is to get the sprinkler up and running. And we're ready to charge the pipes. And there's a leak in the street for the fire suppression system. So I'm working with Public Works right now on that. And I guess they're all out sick on COVID. So they're going to be probably a couple of weeks before they can get out and take a look at it. So I think that's the last thing we have to do on the 2 east side buildings. So I just wanted to say that. And then as Ms. Cannon said, we've already started demo. And actually I got a note today from Paula, just 10 minutes ago, that said the city permits are ready to be picked up for that 3rd building. So that's great news. So we'll throw those down to Wasco County. I'll go down and pay that permit fee, and hopefully we'll get those down to Wasco County, and I'm hopeful they'll get that turned around in a month. They've already had a preview of it, so hopefully they won't have too many questions. So, and I'm happy to answer any other questions if you guys have any of me.
All right. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the execution of the 5th addendum to the disposition of the development agreement between Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and Mr. Todd Carpenter and Ms. Carla McQuaid for property known as the Recreation Building located at 2013-2019 East 2nd Street.
Thank you, Director Frederick. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Kathy Schwartz.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I just would like to thank Mr. Carpenter and Ms. McQuaid for the work. It is such an improvement already, and I totally understand that there's going to be delays. This is extraordinary times that we're in. So I'm just happy to second this motion and happy for you to move forward. And thank you for taking this on.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Good job, Todd. Yep, good work.
All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next on the agenda, we have a couple of discussion items. The first one would be the review of the existing urban renewal financial incentive programs. Director Cannon?
Yes, Chair Long, thank you. This is one of the goals that you as a board set in spring of this past year, 2021, to complete. And we did get this project underway in November, and we're able to get a very well-regarded consultant on board to help us with this. Deb Myhoff is from a firm that she owns, a very small firm, Communitas, and she has a lot of redevelopment experience and has done a lot of work all over the state of Oregon and maybe Washington as well. I really have appreciated the expertise that she brings to the table and her work. I've appreciated, I really enjoyed reading the report, and especially she was able to bring some research and examples from communities that are our size, that are like-sized and have similar values to ours as well. So thank you, Deb, and really look forward to hearing her presentation. She does at the end have some thoughtful discussion questions for you. What I told Chair Long earlier is if this is too much too fast, we haven't had a heavy discussion item in a while here at the board. So we are happy to come back next month. We're already scheduled to come back, but if you need more time to consider these questions next month, Chair Long will take a pulse of the group toward the end, and you can just let us know and we'll come back and continue the discussion next month if needed. So look forward to getting whatever we can, all the feedback we can get. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deb Myhoff.
Great. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate that. I thought it would be helpful just to go over the highlights of what's in the memo I prepared, just sort of looking at your current programs and what other folks are doing to imagine where you might take it from here. And I apologize. I realize I'm a blinking machine. I'm having eye issues, so it's don't be alarmed by the squinting and the blinking. Can I share my screen? Is that possible? Okay, I've not even tried. Great. Give me just 1 second to cue this up for you here. That's the one. All right. I assume everyone can see this. I can't see you all, but please speak up if you're having troubles on my end.
Looks good.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, and if I can advance the slides, we'll be in good shape here. All right, thank you. Alice just sort of recapped the purpose of this review, and the work I'm doing is just to sort of analyze your plan and your goals in your plan, and looking, sort of matching those up with your current offerings and your incentive programs around development and redevelopment. And your outcomes you're trying to achieve, which is, increasing prosperity, the tax base, and while addressing community needs. So just quickly, there is quite a bit of policy guidance on sort of your development or redevelopment programs, sort of how they could roll out and what gets built. This incentives aren't intended to reset these, but I, as I mentioned, looked at your urban renewal plan. I also took a look at your comprehensive plan goals, specifically around economic development and housing. And then your housing needs analysis, just to get a sense about what's needed downtown. So the summary of analysis, it's more detailed in the memo report, but largely, many of your current programs are underused. Some of this, through my conversations with Alice, she's indicated some of it might just be because some refreshed marketing needs to happen, but it also seems like there might be a disconnect between the kind of development outcomes you're seeking and the programs you have available. That said, obviously, many of your incentive programs for historic improvements, storefront improvements and such have been very successful over the life of the plan and used. There are some challenges that remain for how you might encourage creating that neighborhood feel that Alice mentioned, getting more people living as well as working and visiting downtown. And then also just how to use some of your more underused properties. So there's not a lot of wholly vacant properties downtown, but there are some where there's little bits of land on a parcel that's kind of vacant or maybe used semi for storage, but could be a pretty good building site. There are some buildings that could use some assistance, things like that. And then most of your incentive programs, not all, with a couple of exceptions, are loan programs. These can be tricky on both sides of the equation. So for developers, sometimes layering public incentive loan programs on top of what are already often very complex financing deals for getting mixed use and housing built becomes less attractive. And then it becomes even more less attractive, could I say that? Least attractive when it's a small amount of a loan that you're trying to layer in there. It just becomes more hassle than it's worth. And then on your side of the ledger, the city has to track all of these loans that are outstanding. Many go on for years. And as staff change and leadership changes and programs and software platforms change, sometimes that can be a little more complicated than it sounds. And again, for small amounts, the administrative burden can be quite extensive, and sometimes over the years add up to more than the loan itself. So it's worth thinking through sort of what is it you're trying to get out of the loans? Are there some instances where folks may be delivering a community need or goal so strongly that you'd be willing to consider a grant and or that would lessen your administrative burden? So these are questions to think about. You'll see at the end here, I have a few to tease out your thoughts on that. So moving right along, in the research, I did look at other communities that have urban renewal in Oregon, about the same size as the Dalles, or sort of similar kind of downtown. It's not super simple, as you know, to find comparable communities. So I broadened it just a little bit to also look at other urban renewal areas that have similar plan objectives to yours. So, you know, some urban renewal area, there's about 80 currently under implementation in Oregon right now. You know, they come and go. But they have different sort of flavors. Some are very much focused on, you know, transportation investments and not at all about downtown reinvestment. Some are industrial or economic development focused. They're sort of a catch-all, and there are many that are downtown. So I tried to really look at those ones that were most applicable to what you all are interested in. And then I can't even remember which ones they are. I think there's at least one in here that maybe doesn't have the full plan objectives that you have, and maybe isn't quite your same size or density of downtown, but they have an interesting take on how they can administer programs. So I just, in your memo, you'll see, I think there's 1, 2, 3, or 4. I think there's 7 or 8 examples. And there's links to all those programs if you want to really dig in and figure out what their incentive programs are doing. But I grouped them a little bit just for sake of ease to go over them with you briefly here. There are a few urban renewal areas that have some incentive programs very much focused on addressing housing shortages. This includes Madras, which has a whole urban renewal district set up around housing. Redmond has a system development charge buy down for housing development. And then John Day has a suite of programs they're offering to work toward housing, including housing incentives, new homes. I will say that they also have some other unique features. Redmond does a really nice job of timing their SDCs and the building permitting process. Sometimes about, you know, when the money comes in is just as important as how much funding is available. They also have sort of property lien when they offer an incentive. Many community, or many of the areas I looked at do this, where they may be offering a grant, but in exchange for that grant, the owner cannot make changes or significantly modify the property beyond what they're getting the grant for within 5 years. They either have a lien. Sometimes that's common with historic development, but it can be extended to other kinds of development so that you can make sure that your investment is secured. And then I really like John Day's application program. They have one application for all of their incentive programs. It's very simple and accessible for someone to fill out. And then others that do a nice job at sort of packaging a whole bunch of incentives and then streamlining it are Estacada, which sort of, they have 2 major grant programs. One is, and they're based on value. So they have small grants and large grants. And I think, if I recall correctly, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was 50,000 was the breaking point between small and large grants. And they also have 5-year restrictions. They had a really interesting, they have a very streamlined process. And then LeGrand has a revitalization incentive program. They can do a whole bunch of, you know, they sort of flex their funding, their incentive funding to meet all sorts of different objectives. And they have an interesting sort of point-based selection criteria. And the more project meets the criteria, the more points they can get, and possibly more funding. I think it was LeGrand that also had a provision that any grant could be converted to a loan. So if it gets to a certain size, they might just increase it. And then lastly, the last set of examples were just some other really simple and straightforward ways to incent development. City of Fairview, they have again, similar to Estacada, large and small grants program. And they're timed really well. They just have to, you know, the straightforward grant application has to be submitted 10 days before applying for building permits, but after land use approval. So again, putting it in that right spot. And then some very simple criteria, and then leaves it up to a review panel to make that determination. And Veneta has a marketing package that might be an example you want to take a look at. They've put a bunch of their tools in a redevelopment toolkit. It includes SDC subsidy. It includes some other reduction of redevelopment expenses. Some places it's really simple to do SDC because they just do a write down on the building permit itself. That could be an easy way to administer an incentive. I don't know what would be available for the DALs. And then they also have some really simple selection criteria worth thinking about that really just tell the developer or the applicant sort of, here's what we're really trying to do in Veneta. Tell us how you meet these goals, and not make it too complicated. So I cannot see anyone, which is always a little disorienting when you're sharing screen, but I do have a series of questions I was hoping you all might have a discussion around as I work with Alice to try to come up with some options for how to retool your incentive programs, maybe get a new incentive program in there that actually addresses redevelopment or development incentives sort of at a whole comprehensive scale. So these questions are posed just to kind of tease out different angles you might take for incentives, what your appetite is or interest is, and different directions as exampled by some of these other communities.
So one way to do this, Deb, would be, I'm looking at the packet. If you are looking at your packet,
yes,
board members, on page 30, the questions are listed there. And if you have that in front of you, or if the chair could guide us through these questions, then we don't have to share a screen. So just a thought.
Yeah, we can do that.
So you can stop sharing,
great.
Deb, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Right.
So before we move on to these questions for consideration, were there any questions about or clarification requests about the presentation? Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deb. This, in my opinion, this is a great start, and I would personally support having some incentive that clearly or energetically supports redevelopment. We definitely have some, in my opinion, some buildings that have served their purpose and aren't doing the rest of us any good in their current conditions. One thing I would that came to mind while I was reading this is I think we might gain some real additional insights if we did, if it were possible, to do some interviews with some of our property owners. And I don't know if that's within the scope or not, but I do think that would be valuable. I'm thinking particularly of two categories of owners. One is one or two or some number of people that do own buildings that clearly need redevelopment or just plain need knocked down and cleared. Just to get their thoughts on why they have, why they find the current situation acceptable or best suited to them without taking action. And the second, maybe even more important, would be, a couple of folks that have in the last few years have put in time and money to redevelop or take on buildings or buy buildings. There are a couple of folks in that category, and maybe querying them about sort of challenges or they met, hurdles they felt were high that might be lowered, or things that worked really well for them that the city did that we should reinforce. So that's my those are my thoughts on this.
Thank you, Board Member Richardson. Those are good suggestions. Anyone else? Yes.
There
Mr.
needs to be there needs to be some discussion too, as a property manager. One of the things that we run into all the time in residential, but now that I've gotten into some commercial, is the cost to the owner of just having that property, between taxes, you got your water, sewer, all the expenses that are part of the building. And then you've got the older buildings that really need some work. And there isn't a market for the rent that drives to make those repairs and do those things. So you've got owners that many are just sitting on them simply because they don't have the funds or don't have the resources to put into rehabbing them, or if they know that if they do, they're not going to get that money back in the current real estate market. I mean, that all needs to be part of the. I have the old J.D. Smith Jewelers building. I just took that on about 6 months ago, and the rent on that's $2,000 a month. What small business can afford $2,000 a month? I have other rentals at smaller storefronts that are going for $500 a month. Those seem to rent pretty quickly. So, but that there needs to be a discussion of the cost to the property owner and why these things aren't being taken care of. And the laws that are coming out of Salem are not in favor of rental property owners at all. You're a little more lenient on the commercial side, but on the residential side, it's there's a lot of property owners that are actually selling their rentals and just completely getting out of the market if they can. There's a lot of especially in the single family homes, they're just throwing their hands up in the air and they've given up. Now that's a home for somebody to purchase, but it's not a home for somebody to rent. So that needs to be all part of the discussion.
Thank you, Board Member Frederick. Good comments. Anyone else? Okay, I had a couple of comments and a question. In this assessment, there was no mention specifically of blight, which has been a main focus of our urban renewal district. And so I know it's come up a number of times that we're not very inviting from the freeway, and our downtown, the backside of it is a big piece of that. So, I'd like to see some consideration around incentives to assist with that as well. And then there was a comment about, I think, LeGrand. You said something about converting grants to loans. Did you say that backwards? I mean, why would you convert a grant to a loan?
I think they just have a provision in there. If they had a project come along that's interesting, but maybe determine that they don't need quite as much incentive or help, that they held they're grants by default unless the agency decides to convert it to a loan. But I mean, I'd be surprised. I haven't talked to them. I'd be surprised if they've ever done that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I understand. Okay. I thought you were saying if they gave them the grant and then it got converted.
Oh yeah, no. It's at approval. My apologies. Yeah, it's at approval.
Okay. Okay, great. And then the other comment that I had is under your policy guidance section. I think you should add the transportation plan that the city has, because our parking plan is inside there. And I think that has been, parking downtown has been a real hot button issue as well. So those would also be good for us to be considering when we're looking at what we're doing with downtown.
Yeah, great point. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before I move on to the questions that she's looking for? Yes, Mayor Mays.
No. Thank you. I was kind of intrigued by the Redmond housing SDC buy down, I take it that the city of Redmond, for someone who wants to develop downtown, they subsidize the system development charges. Is that?
That's correct. Yep.
This is, I guess this is a question for Alice. Ever since I've been mayor, I've been hearing all about our SDCs. They're too high. They're way out of line. And I don't know if there's ever been any discussion, at least at the staff level, to review our system development charges. And if so, perhaps during that review of our system development charges, we could look at doing something special for the downtown area. I'd like to know what the Urban Renewal Board might think about that.
Yes, Mayor Mays, this has been a favorite incentive idea of mine. When I've heard about SDC subsidies for new units in the downtown, it has sparked an interest for me because it's fairly easy to administer, and it would be a subsidy at time of building permit, so that by that time we have a commitment that the project is going to get done, so we know it'll get done. And it's also at this time the cost per unit is going to be anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 if we did 100% subsidy per dwelling unit. And that's a big chunk, and that's a nice incentive. And that gets to Board Member Frederick's items that, it is costly to revamp these old buildings. And this is a very nice subsidy that's fairly easy to administer. And a few other cities are doing it successfully. I know Fairview, we have Redmond, and there was one other that I'm going to forget, but there are quite a few other cities doing it. And I think it's a really good idea given the policy direction that this board wants to go. And it would be, we could create a budget for it fairly simply based on, if you want to give 100% subsidy. So it's pretty easy to forecast based on what we see in the pipeline in a given year. I mean, you could even set a cap. You could say we're going to subsidize up to X percentage, first come, first served, kind of a thing.
Okay. Board Member Schwartz?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a well-known incentive that is certainly in the affordable housing world of, how do we incentivize builders in a, capitalist market to build, affordable homes, or any homes for that matter. So I think that's a well-known incentive. But my question is, and I'm sorry to be so ignorant, but what incentives do we currently offer?
I'm going to turn this over to our consultant who did a full review of that, and it's in the packet as well. He has it on an early slide. You might want to share the screen again.
Yep, let me just pull that up. That'll work. Thank you.
Current incentive programs. Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm seeing
it doesn't look like there's much.
No, there's not much. Sorry, let me share screen. It's taking me a second to walk and talk here. There's not a ton, and they're here on the right-hand side.
Oh.
So historic district design and restoration program, redevelopment of unused and underused property. That's a loan program. Sorry, my screen's blocked. Civic improvement program, facade improvement, and fire suppression. And I think fire suppression might be the only one that's a straight up grant. And I'm going to stop sharing here. So that's one. And then the other thing is just sort of, facade improvement is quite common. Having sort of these very boutique programs, very specific to blighted buildings being demolished for one, that's one application process you have to run through. Then a very specific program for fire suppression. There may be reasons around your funding that you may need to keep that fire suppression separate, but so a lot of times it's easier to just make all of those available in one program and say, tell us what your costs are and what your pressure points are. Let's have a conversation about what our goals and needs are, and then find the right match. I suspect it's hard to market some of these sort of niche programs.
It has been hard. I just in response to that, that first of all, when I look at the program, the preponderance is on loans. And I don't think there is a lot of interest in loans. They're hard to administer. I know our finance director would agree, and just have a lot of tracking, and more people want money, grants, and that I understand that. And then they seem outdated. It just seems like they're 10 years old. They have the feeling of, for instance, there is a grant that's offered for design, architectural design, and is up to $3,000. Well, that seems low to me. So it just depends on, of course, the project, but a developer would look at that and say, well, it'll take me that much time and labor just to work through the application. Why would I do that? So it's, I would like to have fewer programs that are addressing more goals, maybe a few loans, but mostly grants. In the latter years of our agency, I think it would be better to have grants, just because those loans will live on for years following. And that means the city staff will have to live on and keep administering those. So.
Is that what we have with Mr. Carpenter's program? Is that a loan that we just, or is that
Mr. Carpenter, you mean the rec building?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yeah, what we did there, and I wasn't here at the time, but my understanding is we did a big, what I would call a land write down. So we offered the property at a discounted value so that he would take it and redevelop it. So that's his major incentive that he's received.
I see, but he's paying back some, right? Or
when he meets certain milestones, when the development meets certain milestone deadlines, then he will be able to pay basically he's getting all three of those parcels for $50,000. So for two of those, he'll be spending about 12.5 or 15, maybe it's 15,000 in a few weeks. He'll be spending that. He did a down payment. Now he's paying back the cost once he finishes the development on two of the storefronts. He's spending 15, and then the remaining, I think, 25. So yeah.
Okay. So he's just paying on that 50,000.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay. Do we have anybody with loans out right now?
We do. We have a loan with the Commodore Development, which is the apartment project or apartment building right across from City Hall. And that has a balloon payment that's going to come due in 2026. And that they'll owe about $280,000 at that time. And right now they're paying very low interest annually to us. And then the other, we have a loan with Mr. Zilka he spent, I believe he bought that property for about $150,000. And we have a loan with him on that. He's making monthly payments on that. And I'm going to look to Jonathan. I might be forgetting one, but I believe those are the two. We might have one more, and I can't remember right off the top of my head.
I can't think of any off the top of my head either, but there certainly may be. In fact, I can look into this slightly and maybe email the board after hours and give a list of some of our loans that I think might be in play. But Alice hit the nail on the head, I think, with just those two.
I think that's all. It's listed in the budget. I can do the same research, Jonathan, and get back to you after the meeting with confirmation if those are all the loans we have.
Board Member Frederick?
Part of any discussion also needs to be define affordable. I hear that word affordable keeps getting thrown out, but what is affordable? What's affordable to me, or what's affordable to any of you, or the poor guy that's sleeping over here in front of the Sears store, the old Sears store. But affordability, everybody talks about affordable, but there needs to be a definition of affordable in the Dells.
I think, John, there really is a definition. I don't have it in front of me, but when I'm talking about affordable homes, there's a definite definition that the Mid-Columbia Housing Authority uses. And so I'll get that to you. I'll get that to the board. But it's definitely that low income affordability that I'm talking about when I use that term. So I just don't know what it is exactly.
defined in
Again, as a
state
property
statute.
manager, I know about Mid-Columbia Housing. I deal with them almost daily. They subsidize these people heavily. I mean, I have renters that are paying $4 or $5 a month rent because the rest is being afforded. So that's still not affordable for these people because the taxpayers are footing the bill. I've seen those studies. I know that, Kathy, but
Yeah.
what their numbers are really don't match what the market is, because sometimes there's a lot of negotiations that has to go in when we move a HUD tenant in and Mid-Columbia Housing has to move monies around to make things happen. So
Director Cannon?
Yeah, in response to that, I was talking to the chair, Chair Long, earlier today, and I've talked, maybe it was Chair Grossman before that. I've talked to a few of you about this, in that we've been in the urban renewal business here in the Dalles for over 30 years now. And when this plan was developed, it's developed with a set of goals. And our goals in the Dalles at the time when they passed this plan in 1990 didn't include many social goals, and affordable housing wasn't on the list. What is on that list predominantly are programs to raise property values and raise tax revenue and raise prosperity for members, for property owners in the agency and for the community at large. So I have stayed away, for that very reason, I've stayed away from mentioning affordable housing unless it comes up from you as a board. I did work, as I mentioned to the chair earlier today, I was the executive director for an agency in Gresham, probably 15 years ago now, and that agency had a lot of social goals attached to it because of the extreme poverty in that part of the city of Gresham. So it was addressed in the goals, and so we could develop programs around it. I feel like absent those policies, it's going to have to be one of those things that will require some leadership from the board to say this is important and this is why. I do know this board has been very interested in making sure that when we finish our agency, when we close the agency and we're done with the urban renewal business in downtown, we have raised property values enough that we all boats rise for all the taxing entities. We need to be real careful, I would say, with not adding too many more properties that don't pay taxes, that are nonprofit status. So it's just something that I throw that out there. Of course, you can always disagree with me and set different policies than what I've said. I'm just going from what I've seen in the current plan.
Thank you. I really just want to clarify. I throw that term out because it's very common that SDC charges are a real effective way to get affordable housing built. But I'm certainly not advocating without a full board discussion that is what we should be concentrating on here. So does that help?
I think that was aimed at you, John. Did that help?
well, yeah, the government needs to look at what they're charging people to build houses. I mean, I agree 100%.
Okay,
It needs to
great.
be looked at.
All right. So if there are no other burning questions, I think we should move on to the questions in the packet. And the first one is there an example that strikes the best balance between effectiveness and efficiency? Stacy?
I'm not sure exactly if I'm spot on answering the question, but I did like the idea that was mentioned with fewer application processes, and perhaps it's as simple as I kind of liked if the project that you're looking for is large, then it's greater than 50 or whatever the number is that you pick, but simplifying that process to make it simpler for the agency and the staff, as well as make it more user friendly. So I'm not sure if that's exactly where the question was what they were looking for, but I kind of liked that idea, I guess. And so it still gives you some flexibility in kind of setting some parameters, but making it much simpler.
Deb, did you want to address that or help guide the
Yeah,
discussion?
I would just say there's no magic in these questions. They're really intended to help get the kind of feedback you just provided. So thank you for that. So yeah, anything that helps sort of guide your likes or dislikes and ideas that have been tossed around here, that would be helpful.
So I'm hearing Board Member Coburn say that that single application idea, simplifying, would be a nice way to go.
Even if it's two, right? Like in that, was it LeGrand or whoever had the greater than 50 and left, whatever the number is, but at least I need to use one application for whatever I'm looking for. And it allows staff to be experts at those applications as well.
Simplify, maybe streamline.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Deb, do you want to just go ahead and
Yeah. So the second question actually is just hitting on what you were talking about. So I might skip over that. It talks about whether you have a preference for simplifying and consolidating your current programs, maybe amplifying them a little bit. I want to just check in with you. You just had the conversation about potentially sort of affordable housing and the more subsidized affordable housing term, but are you interested in exploring incentives that could be for all types of development that's allowable under your zoning code and comprehensive plan downtown? Or are you more, your plan allows for all of these uses, residential, mixed use, commercial, industrial, and it follows your comp plan and zoning. Is there any reason to think that you all aren't open to all of those possible uses being incentivized?
This is Dan Richardson. I'm sorry, my camera's off for just a second. No, and I guess in my view, we want to incentivize more than housing. In fact, I think housing is kind of the question, at least in my mind, how best to do that. But we've talked about other things. We've mentioned, redevelopment and blight, and not necessarily with an emphasis on housing, but maybe just including housing.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on? Okay, I'm going to move us along. We can always go back. Also, sort of thinking about whether incentives should be really focused on one sub area of your plan district, or sorry, plan district isn't the right term, but of your urban renewal area, or if you would make all your incentives available area wide. Obviously they'd have to meet criteria, zoning, et cetera, but do you have an interest in targeting or focusing your incentives just on a couple of blocks? Or are you okay if they're available anywhere in the district?
Well, I would like to see them area wide, because we do focus on downtown because it's an easily definable area, but our urban renewal area actually extends much farther east and west, and there's quite a bit of area out there that could use some improvement and possibly development with incentives from us, as long as we're incentivizing the types of development that we'd like to see out there, either from our strategic planning or the citywide strategic planning that's going to happen.
Anyone else have thoughts about area wide or focused on a few blocks? Or
Alice, can you tell me how far west does it go? I can't remember.
Oh boy, I'm gonna now have to look that up. Paula, maybe.
Basically goes out to the that I was about to call it a roundabout, but out to the bridge with the fish on it, like where that little area is that we have so many motorhomes sometimes. But it's only on the Second
North
Street side,
side.
not Sixth Street.
Okay, 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 that's good. Okay, then I think I would be in favor of, the entire area, as Darcy said. Although I, really like things downtown, but there's a lot of opportunity out that way as well.
Yeah. And headed east, there's property out there because it goes out around big gyms. So.
And if we're concerned about how we look from the freeway, we don't want to limit ourselves to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Good point, Tracy.
All right, here's another, you all aren't locked into these answers either. As we sort of develop some options, you might sort of flex your thinking on this, but it's just helpful for me and for Alice to think this through a little bit. This really gets at what we were just talking about a minute ago, which is subsidized affordable housing. What do you think with your incentive programs about limiting the eligibility of tax exempt projects? Those are projects that are often referred to as, what we often call affordable housing, are really projects that are publicly subsidized, run and owned by nonprofit organizations that can apply for tax abatement. So you could limit the eligibility of those types of uses, but it might mean that you're not getting some of the workforce housing that you need in your area. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there.
Board Member Frederick?
Unless the property is paying full property taxes, we shouldn't be interested in it. The whole point of urban renewal is to take blighted property and put it back on the tax rolls at the full rate. So when you start talking about subsidizing, we've got the Commodore building over here. Part of that, I understand, is subsidized. The floor that, it's not all, but some of it is. That's not the purpose of urban renewal. It's to remove blight and put the things back on property tax roll at the going rate.
Anyone else have any comments?
I think that's a good statement. I think there are other options out there for subsidizing housing units. But I agree. I don't think that is really what our job is here. But certainly supportive of other options out there that can help get these places built for people, because we do need them. But I don't really think it's our job here at this board to do that.
Other thoughts and comments? I'll allow Mr. Carpenter to make a comment. If Paula, if you don't mind unmuting.
Thank you. Paula gave me control a long time ago. I've been quiet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I agree with John Frederick. I think, but I really would like to see the board consider workforce housing, a portion of the property, and a effort among all the different entities. I talked to Alice about this. We've got the PUD, Wasco County, and the city, and urban renewal. If we could all pull together an A to Z blueprint for building owners, that if they did affordable workforce housing, a portion of their housing for that, then you would get A, B, C, D, and E. And I also really like the idea of just as a building owner of getting some of those, the first things ticked off, because a lot of times you guys ask for, hey, what's it going to cost? And we don't know until our architectural done, our hazardous waste is done, all this. And that's a big expense, especially on a property owner who, as Mr. Frederick said, doesn't have a lot of incentive to really do anything. So all of a sudden he's got to put $100 grand down to get blueprints and hazardous waste and do all this kind of stuff. If that stuff could be covered ahead of time, and then you could say, okay, this project's going to be 1.2 million. If the owner will do 25% of that in workforce housing at an affordable rate for based on whatever that medium income is for that area, then we will pitch in 15% or 20% of the project. I kind of like that idea. Those are my thoughts. I'll write it all up for you guys later. I have a lot of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, isn't it true if the city were to do something with the SDC charges, it could be across the board, whether it's an urban renewal project or it's a affordable housing project through the housing agency, or just a developer that wants to build something in that range, right? So, I mean, I think, you know, I don't really know much about all this, but reducing those SDC charges seems like sounds like we had a mayor that was interested, and you know, we've got some city councilors on here, and you know, it seems like that's a great incentive that we ought to consider, you know, advocating for.
Yes.
Chair Schwartz, I couldn't agree more. So I've been, or Vice Chair Schwartz, sorry, couldn't agree more.
Oh,
I really, yeah, I really like the SDC subsidy, and I've said that already, but I think that's a very simple, clean program. The other program that I did not share with, I don't think Deb did any background research on this, but we do have a vertical housing tax abatement program in our city. And we even have enacted some local rules that allow us to administer it ourselves, so we don't go through the state. So that is in place, and that's great. What I like about that program is that there's a time limit on tax abatement, and it's only under certain conditions if you have a mixed use type of development, redevelopment. So that's something that I should add to the mix with our consultant to make sure she looks at that in partnership with everything else that is on the table. So.
That's a good point. I was going to ask you about that because that is time limited, but it does take things off the tax roll, which affects multiple agencies when things are off the tax rolls.
So maybe we come back with a review of so that you all have a summary of what that program does do and what the stipulations are for property owners.
Okay. And speaking of vertical housing, Alice, do we have any incentives or that would fit with people who need to put an elevator in order to get housing on the upper levels? Do we have anything that would be applicable, or do we need to consider something like, because that's pretty expensive item, just like fire suppression?
I don't think so. And Deb, I didn't see anything specific to elevators. Did you?
No, I didn't. I think my suspicion is other communities are probably doing that with just sort of larger incentive programs where they, you know, are offering either just a defined amount, $5,000, $10,000 a unit or per square foot or something like that toward any eligible building cost. And then that would be in that sort of eligible building cost list. I don't recall specifically seeing elevator.
Yeah, see that something like that would be nice. As board member Coburn mentioned, like streamlining and having a simpler process. If we could add some things that we know are going to be that they're going to need assistance with. Yeah. I also like to make one more comment, which is it's possible that now that urban renewal is separate from the city, that we ought to consider intentionally partnering with the city and looking at the possibility of using some of the new tax revenue or the the new monies coming in from Google to incentivize housing downtown. If that's truly a goal of the city, then maybe that's something that we could look toward, because that would help maybe some of these pencil out, but not be loans from urban renewal, and basically but get a better return on investment for the things that we have. And the exchange would be, because we would be giving them more upfront help, that they would need to go on the tax rolls and continue to pay property taxes to all the entities, rather than doing it the other way around and giving the property tax. I mean, and obviously put some kind of 5-year, 10 years on it, restrictions to protect the investment. Anybody else have any comments around these questions?
I guess I would say back to the elevator idea, maybe what, in the interest of sort of simplifying and streamlining, maybe what we do there is decide what we're trying to encourage. In that case, it might be, making use of our vertical space, our second and third floor, second floors anyway, and just sort of giving lump amounts, and letting the people taking on the projects, the entrepreneurs and the developers, decide how they would use the incentive, rather than saying it's got to be for elevators. Maybe they've got a cousin in the elevator business and they figure they can figure it out smarter than the city can. But by golly, they have, they think it's going to be very expensive to put in new, stairs or something. So I would say, let's keep it streamlined. If we're going to streamline it, let people figure out what they need it for, if it meets our goals.
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're saying incentivize particular projects and let them decide how to get to that end goal, specifically with the funds.
Yeah.
As long as we're getting the end. Okay.
Yes.
I think that makes a lot of, I'll just offer my 2 cents. Sorry. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in a community like yours that's largely built out. So we're looking at either repurposing existing buildings or building new on parcels that maybe don't have a real standard size and shape. That's common in older cities, where it's just easier if you can flex your money to flex with whatever the strange building condition might be or development condition might be.
So Alice, we've kind of talked about the timelines a couple of times, but like you said, we've got the city community visioning process, and then we've got the strategic planning for urban renewal. And if we change, if that comes up, if strategic planning comes up with different goals or projects, we have to revise our plan, correct? Because it has to be in the plan in order to work on something.
I would say maybe it may be that let's wait and see what comes out of the citywide vision. It may be that the goals of the urban renewal plan are written generally enough that they all fit in just fine. But if it looks like there's going to be a conflict either in your strategic planning effort or the citywide vision, then we might have to amend the plan. But we can wait and see. But in the meantime, I really, in terms of this project, I would love kind of have a goal for myself, and it's only my goal, to have a new incentive program up and running the first half of this year. So I really would like to move right along, or maybe even by this spring, March, April, May period, so that these developers who are knocking on our door and want to build, we can offer them something. So, and based on what you've said so far about flexibility and streamlined and efficiency, that plays well into the idea that if we have some different goals that come out, that we would have a program that's adaptable to go with the goals of the board at the time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that? So, Director Cannon, what do you and Ms. Myhoff need from us in order for direction, in order to go forward and bring something back to us?
I think we have enough, and I'm going to look to Deb. Do you have enough direction, Deb, for us to meet tomorrow or the next day and huddle about a recommendation? I think we would be ready to move into a recommendation if you are ready for us to go that way. Then we can bring that back next month. That was our plan, or the month following.
Okay, so I just want to take like a consensus of the board and see where everybody is at. Is everybody good with that? Is anybody not good with that? Okay, looks like we're good with that. So
Okay. Well, I will work with Ms. Mayhoff on this. And the other thing I wanted to let you know is that annually we bring forward in February, we bring the audit, and we also bring the either January or February, and we also bring the annual financial report. So I will bring that back next month in addition to what I hope will be a proposal or a next step toward having a proposal on this incentive program. And we may have, we may have some more work that is project specific on the Tony's building at that time as well.
Okay, and then something that just popped into my mind as you were saying that, when we do the budgeting process, is this going to create any difficulty in estimating what we need in different pots of money? Like if we haven't decided on our specific incentives, or are we going to be able to be general enough in the budget to handle this?
I think we can be general enough in the budget. This past year, we budgeted 60 for the past few years. We budgeted $60,000 annually for the incentive program, and we always have the ability to come back and do a supplemental budget if needed. So that's something we can do if there is demand out there that, if for whatever reason we have more demand than we have funds budgeted and appropriated for it. So let me take a look at that. That's another reason to get ahead of this and to get the program to you in February. And somewhere in there, in April, we'll be beginning our budget hearing. And then you'll do a budget adoption in May. So during that period, it would be nice by that time to have our annual goal setting completed. If we haven't made any more progress on the strategic plan, at least let's make goals for the year, for the upcoming year, and that will guide our budgeting process. So why don't we plan on coming back next month with another either a proposal or another round of discussions about the incentive program, and then I'll come back to you in March with a goal setting session at a minimum, or maybe another installment on moving forward with strategic planning.
Okay, that sounds good, and that will also give us a time to get our new board member, Maria Pena, a little bit up to date so she can participate as well. Mm-hmm. And whoever else gets appointed. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap that up and move on to the second discussion item, which is the verbal update on the Tony's building.
Yeah, this project, it just continues to, I've been very pleased with the fact that you gave me direction back in April as your director to move forward with the EPA grant, to participate in the EPA grant for brownfield cleanup, environmental cleanup of the Tony's property. And to date, we've used about $30,000 to $35,000 worth of funds. It paid for a phase 1 environmental consultant, or phase 1 environmental assessment. And we have a phase 2 that's been completed as well, all in a short period of time. And then the next step, and it will be within, I think it's the week of January, the last week in January, we will have a contractor out to remove the underground storage tank. It's underneath the sidewalk on Federal Street between 1st and 2nd. It's right up against the building, the Tony's building. So if you see contractors out digging a big hole, that's what that's about. As part of the archaeological permit that went along with that, it's part of the process to invite tribal members to be present for the excavation, and we do have a tribal representative that wants to be present for that, and appreciate that. And so we hope to have that the tank removed and then the soil evaluated to determine if there's more cleanup to happen around that tank. And so I'll have more of an update after that's completed. And then the other thing we have submitted very recently is we have this other opportunity. So I think when all is said and done, let me just back up. When all is said and done on the EPA grant, we expect to receive $60,000 to $90,000 worth of work on the project to do that environmental cleanup. So it has been well worth our time and effort. And I've been really pleased with how responsive the grant manager, Jim Schweinoff, who's on our city staff, And our consultant, Stantec, has been very helpful. So the next piece is that because of the work we've done, the phase 1 environmental and phase 2 environmental assessments, we also qualify for a Business Oregon grant to remove the asbestos. And I was told that we could qualify for up to $250,000 of a grant to assist us toward. We think that the current cost estimate for the asbestos abatement alone is going to be about $350,000, which is about half of what we expect the total cost of the demo to be. We think the demo could be anywhere from $700 to $750 at this time. So I really think that's a worthy, it's worth our time and effort to move forward with that grant. We've received a lot of support from Business Oregon. So I hope by next month, the step we're in right now is what's called the pre-app to getting that grant going. Then I hope within a short time, and I hope within a week or two, we'll hear from Business Oregon and they'll ask us to apply for a full grant application. So a policy question that I want to ask you, and I might just ask for a consensus right now, and I'll come back with, when I have a little bit more information, I'll come back with a question that would require a motion. But for now, what I've been told is that as part of this, there would be up to $250,000 that would be grant for the asbestos removal abatement. And then an opportunity to fund the rest of the demolition cost with a low or no interest loan. Now, in the budget, conservatively, we already have the funds set aside to pay for the demo. I budgeted, I believe last year, $550,000. So we have the funds. If we do get the grant, we have the funds there, so we don't need to take out a loan. However, it might be worth our energy to look at from a cash flow perspective. Sometimes doing those low or no interest loans, it might make sense to leverage for a little bit of time and then pay it back in a balloon payment in a short, kind of have a short-term loan. If you're interested in having me look into that, I'm happy to do so. I don't feel like I have enough information to share with you to have you make a decision. But if you're interested in having me look at a low or no interest loan to fund the demolition, I'm happy to do so. I do believe we have the funds in the budget already appropriated to do that. We don't have enough money to spend $700,000 for the demo. But if we get the grant, we do have enough money. So any interest in having us look at a low or no interest loan for a short period to fund the demo?
I see 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. People are nodding. Yes. Okay. All right. Looks like you have a consensus.
Okay. I will come back then with more information on that as this progresses. Been really pleased with the support we've gotten from Business Oregon, Michael Held, and there's a representative named Karen Homolak. I believe that's how I say her name, who's been super helpful as well.
Thanks for doing all the work on the grants. I know the beginning of the process, there was some concern that it might slow us down. And I'm thankful that that didn't play out. And now it seems like you've parlayed that into additional grant funding possibilities that you've dug up. So thank you very much for doing that. Appreciate that a lot.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chair. And I don't think I had anything else on the rest of the agenda. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have anything for Director Cannon? Okay. Are there any board member comments or questions on any other topic? Yes, Mr. Frederick.
I've been on this board for 7-8 years now, and this is actually the first open discussion we've had. And I'd like to thank Alice for the work of putting this together and having a consultant come in here and get the discussion going. Darcy, you ran a great meeting, so I'm encouraged. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Director Cannon, did you have any other comments before I close the meeting?
I don't think so. I think that's all for now. And thank you for all your support and thanks for hanging in with a meaty discussion today.
Yep. Good job, everybody. That was great. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you, everybody.
Night.